don't want to share it. Hello, everyone. Thank you for tuning in. We are getting ready to get started. I'm going to give everyone seconds to get on, and then we will hop and dive into the conversation. All right. Thank you all for tuning in. And welcome to our collective conversation. Today's topic is co-parenting. All right. Uh-oh, my thing is not muted. Hold on. Okay, there we go. I think Glenna's thing is on. Let me turn the screens on. All right. Okay. Hi, everyone. Welcome to our collective conversation. Today, we are talking about co-parenting with a toxic ex during and after quarantine. So this conversation is for anyone who is co-parenting in a difficult co-parenting situation, who needs some tips on how to minimize the drama and everything else that comes with the territory of being in a divided or blended family. So for those of you who don't know me or who are new here, my name is Merissa Grayson. I am the founder and managing attorney of Collective Legal and Crisis Management Firm. We are a firm that represents people across the country in different cases related to child custody, family law, litigation, business matters, entertainment, criminal law, you name it, we pretty much cover it for the most part. So our objective and our goal during this time is to be a resource to people and to just share information that we know will be beneficial right now, specifically, for those of us who are not used to or able to get access to this information, or who just may not know what needs to be done on different topics. So we've had this conversation on various topics. We've covered everything from tenants' rights to employee rights, child custody and visitation during quarantine. We've talked about business mistakes to avoid, how to survive your household during this quarantine. So if not already, feel free to check out all of our replays. They are at our vault on our website. It is Collective LCM in Crisis Management, LCM.com/, the Collective Vault. So I'll put the link in the comment section. So just to preface this, our firm is filled with attorneys and professionals, and our conversations on a regular day during business hours are pretty buttoned up because we are professionals. But these collective conversations are a lot more informal. We're a lot more relaxed. It's essentially just going to be a conversation between us where we allow you all to tune in. So if you have any questions, go ahead and drop them in the comment section. I'll be checking those periodically, and we'll go ahead and get your questions answered. So without further ado, again, thank you all for tuning in. If you know anyone who could use this information, please go ahead and share this video out to everyone in your network. And now I would like to introduce Dr. Glenna. So Dr. Glenna is our lead mental health expert at the Collective Legal and Crisis Management Firm. She also has a private mental health practice where she services people who are experiencing anxiety or other mental health issues. She helps people figure out how to manage their mental health before it becomes mental illness. And the reason that I wanted Dr. Glenna to be involved in this conversation, I'm a child custody and family law attorney. And a lot of times, in almost all of my cases, which are typically high conflict, there's just a lot of back and forth, a lot of residual damage that's done, and a lot of work that just needs to be done on all aspects, whether it relates to my clients, the opposing party, or even the who, if your mental health issues or if the dynamic between the parties gets too crazy, your children, of course, will be negatively impacted. I know that sometimes there is very little that you can do to control the other parent and to control what they're doing. But our goal is to make sure that all of the steps that you are taking will be in your best interest, will help you to be at peace and at ease, regardless of what the other parent is doing, and will also, again, minimize the drama in your divided or blended family. So again, welcome everyone. And for watching, please share this out if you know anyone who could use this information. And Dr. Glenna,
hello, everyone. Thank you guys so much for joining us again. Like Merissa said, my name is Dr. Glenna. I'm a mental health therapist. I have a private practice in Torrance, California, where I specialize in anxiety-based disorders and emotional abuse recovery. And so one fun fact, I don't do relationships. Sometimes people, they'll call me and they'll say, oh, do you do couples counseling? Like, no, I have a friend of mine, Melissa Dumas. She does it much better than I do. I really focus on individuals. But why my piece in this puzzle is really important is because I specialize in emotional abuse recovery. And so a lot of my clients, probably about 50-50 in terms of anxiety and the abuse recovery, a lot of my clients are dealing with toxic partners, toxic exes, toxic co-parenting, toxic marriages, and just things that have happened in their past, and they're still trying to heal from it. And so I think that this conversation is very important because oftentimes when you're in the middle of a toxic or unhealthy relationship, you have an unction that something is off, but you don't always know how to navigate it. You don't know what to do. You don't know how to get out of it. And you don't have a strong sense of what's normal and healthy and what's not normal and healthy. And so I think that the stress of the pandemic and everything that's going on, it just exacerbates probably some pre-existing problems that were already there. But I think this is really important just to stay grounded and to be able to hear someone objectively tell you what's standard and what's not standard. And I'm a firm believer in giving very practical tips on how to manage things. I don't like just having conversation about things and then it's just, we've had all this conversation, we threw in the air. It's like, okay, now what do we do with it?
Awesome. So I know that in a lot of instances, we have situations where no matter what you do, or at least we feel like I've been doing everything to try to minimize the drama and the conflict. And where does that come from, where one person is just out of control and it doesn't, we try to meet in kindness, or at least we think we are, right? And it just does not go in the right direction? How can we minimize all of the issues that come with dealing with someone who has a problem for every solution, right? Because there are so many people who, it doesn't matter how positive you try to be, it doesn't matter what you offer. You know, I offer extra time, but they're complaining about that, or I offer extra money and they're saying there's got to be an ulterior motive, or whatever the case may be. So when you have a problem or a person who is literally can come up with the problem for every single solution, what are we doing? How can we deal with that type of person in a way that doesn't drive us crazy, especially those of us like me? I'm a positive vibes person, right? Like I just don't have time for it. And a lot of times I would just shut down because I just don't like drama, right? I don't like conflict. And what does that type of person do?
One thing that we always have to remember, sometimes there are these situations where like it was a one-night stand, or, you know, where maybe you and somebody got together, you didn't really have a lot of history with this individual, and boom, now you have a child together, and now you have to co-parent with this person. So that's one type of scenario. But oftentimes people have dated this person, maybe where they were even married to this person, and now you guys are not together anymore and you have to co-parent. So one thing that you always have to remember is they are who they are and they are who they were. Maybe there were toxic traits, there were selfish traits, there were manipulative traits. that happened while you guys were dating or while you guys were married. And the person doesn't just stop being who they are because now they have to co-parent with you, right? People bring whatever skill set they have, they bring it to the table. And if that skill set is manipulation, that is what they're going to bring to the table. If that skill set is to upset everything in order to exhaust everyone so that they can get their way, that's the skill that they're going to bring to the table. And so one big thing to keep in mind is just be mindful of who it is that you are dealing with. Be mindful of who's this other person. Who are they? What's their character like? Right down to like, you know what? She do have issues with authority, so I can't be surprised that she's not following this court order. Historically, she's always had issues with authority, so I can't expect that she's just going to pop out and be the super compliant person for the good of all parties involved. No, she is who she is. Or you know what? He's always been a bit of a liar. You know, he's never really been really forthright about who he is or how much money he makes or, you know, what he's doing with his time or his resources. And so I can't expect him to not be a liar now that I need him to be a positive co-parent. And so one of the first things that you can do is just acknowledge the person that you're dealing with. That doesn't mean that you hold their past against them, you know, because you do have people. I'm a firm believer that everyone has the capacity to change, to grow. Everyone can look at their faults and say, you know what, that's who I was, and I've grown from that person. And so we do give people the benefit of the doubt. But if someone is showing up with the same characteristics that they had when you were, probably some of the same reasons why you didn't want to continue to be in a relationship with them to begin with, is showing up now in your co-parenting. So just be honest about who this person is. Like, let's not live in a fantasy world and just, you can't expect you out of somebody else. Right. So if you're positive and if you're always thinking of a solution, it would be nice if the whole world operated like that. But we just have to acknowledge, like, you know what? That's just not who they are. And then once we acknowledge who they actually are, now we know our starting point. You know, it may be like, oh no, he's going to pay that money on time, but he's going to be late picking his kid up because that's who he is. You know, so instead of, we know where our starting point is. We know what we need. We don't need to have a discussion about money because money isn't the issue. We need to have a discussion about respect for time, or vice versa. Like, he going to be here. He going to be at every football game. You know, he going to be at every cheerleading competition, but he ain't going to pay that child support at all. He going to pay half of it and come up with 17 excuses as to, you know, why he can't pay it. So we acknowledge where we are, and then it's like, okay, well, where's our real issue? Where's our starting point? And start from there.
Got it. Good stuff. So let me take a commercial break because people are asking, where can they get the sweatshirt? So I don't have the link. What is the link? So I can drop that in the comment.
So I kind of left this out of the introduction. I teach the concept of therapy is a lifestyle. It's the idea of addressing your mental health before it becomes mental illness. Unfortunately, right now, you cannot purchase the sweatshirt. You would have to literally like catch me in the street and see if I pop the trunk on you. I'm on right now. I'm on my hood stuff. But so there is no link to buy the sweatshirt right now. But once the tickets for the brunch go on sale, which right now is scheduled for July 12th, the sweatshirts will go back on sale at the brunch, and then we'll put them on sale online. And then we'll have the different colors. We'll have the black and white. We'll have the pink and hot pink. We'll have the red and blue. We'll have the orange and gray. Along with some other things that I kind of have in the works. But right now, the sweatshirt's not on sale. Sorry, guys.
Gotcha. Well, if you're not already following Dr. Glenna, follow her on all social media outlets. She is at Dr. Glenna LCSW. And so you can stay up to date on when she drops her shirts again. So let me go ahead and go to the comment section because I know that we had a couple of questions, and then I had some questions come in on my page as well. So let's see. Here we go. There we go. What advice would you give a parent who has a court order for visitation that the co-parent refuses to honor during COVID? And what strategies would you offer to help the child cope who is caught in the middle? So you answer part 2, then I'll come back and answer the part 1.
That's literally what I was going to say. So in terms of whenever it comes to court order stuff, my answer is always do what your lawyer says. So your lawyer here is going to give us some advice on that. But coping strategies. I'm a firm believer in being honest with the child at an age-appropriate level, okay? And there are ways of doing that without bad-mouthing the other parent. There are ways of being like, you know, like, your father, he's supposed to pick you up, and I don't know exactly why he's not picking you up, but at this point, he's not here, you know? And so you can be very forthright at an age appropriate level. The way that you talk to a 3-year-old to explain why mommy or daddy is not picking them up is different from the way you talk to a 16-year-old. So you want to make sure that it's age appropriate and respectful, and you're not bad mouthing. Always think, if this was being recorded and played on a jumbotron, would you be embarrassed about your actions? Would you be embarrassed about your word choice? So just keep that in mind. Pretend like someone is always videoing you, and someone's going to see this footage later of how you interacted with your child. And just for the child's sake, it's always healthy to give them a forum to talk about their feelings. I think sometimes as parents, I know I have 2 little ones, and you know, when their feelings are hurt, like, I wish I could take it. You know, I wish I could alleviate it, physical hurt, emotional hurt. But unfortunately, if we do, we don't teach them how to manage their big emotions. We don't teach them that it's okay to have ill feelings towards someone that you love. And we don't teach them how to verbalize it, how to stand up for themselves, and how to set boundaries. So being able to just sit there and say, you know what, I understand, you know, that it bothers you that mommy or daddy didn't come to pick you up. Do you want to talk to me about it? Do you want to tell me how you feel? Is there something that we can do to help you kind of move your feelings along so you can feel a little better? And sometimes that's just holding space for them, which is literally just kind of being there and just being understanding, maybe giving them a hug, letting them lay on you a little longer than they normally would. Sometimes it's helping them to understand, like, are you feeling like this? Are you feeling like that? Without feeding them emotions, because that's manipulative. It's a whole nother issue. But just kind of really being there for them and giving them space. And like I said, as a parent, I know it's tough because you don't want to see your babies hurt. But if you want to help them in the long run, teach them how to manage their big emotions at this level. And I cannot tell you how vital this is to teach your children that they can experience the duality of being hurt and angry with a loved one and still loving that person. Because I think sometimes we think it's one or the other. Either that person hurts you and you hate them, or you forgive them for everything they've ever done and pretend like nothing happened. So give them space to be able to talk about their hurt feelings and their disappointment, and just kind of give them a little extra support during those times.
So when it comes to the parent who, if there's a parent, for example, that's being withheld from the child, right? And the child is being told something like, well, you know, your mom or your dad just didn't show up, right? Even though they know that there's a reason that they're not there. How do you explain, well, I wanted to come, but I was not allowed to, so to speak, without it being considered throwing the other parent under the bus, being disrespectful, or what's the word, involving children? This is a word we use in child custody cases a lot. A lot of our cases, the parents are ordered not to involve the children in grown-up situations, right? So how do we balance that? Because you don't want to sit there and keep protecting the other parent, right? Who's withholding you from the child and making it seem like it's not their fault, but at the same time, you don't want to get in trouble in court either. So how can you? What are different ways you can frame that type of conversation?
You mean for the parent that has the child with them, or for the parent that's not able, that's being kept away from the child?
The one that's being kept away from the child.
The one that's being kept away. Someone had said this before, about either writing letters. You know, I've even seen the non-custodial parent actually keep records, and when they felt that it was appropriate, they kind of shared it a little bit at a time. And when I say appropriate, I'm talking about when the child was older and better able to process it, to just basically help the child to understand, like, I love you, and you know, there are some things that you may not understand that are happening on the court side, but please know that I love you. Please know that I want to be involved in every single aspect of your life. And just reassuring that. And every time you do have the opportunity to be with them, prove it. Like, if you do have the opportunity to spend time with them, get off your phone. You know, tell your friends, if they call you, my kids here, I got to call you back. I got to spend some time with my baby, you know, like, prove it to them so that they can see, you know, because kids they're very perceptive. And so, you know, if you say, oh, I love you and I want to spend time with you, and then they get there and you got 20 other things to do, they're going to pick up on that. So when you do have the opportunity to talk on the phone with them, ask them about every single aspect of their life. Ask them about their Legos, their Barbie dolls, their schoolwork, their friends, you know, how you doing with learning how to ride your bike, and You know, did you learn how to do, how's your crossover? Like, I mean, ask about every single aspect of their life and make sure that they know that you love them. You don't even really need to talk about the other parent. Believe it or not, it works better when you just focus on the positive between you and them. You don't need to insert division. You don't, well, your mama said this, or well, your daddy said. You don't even need to get into that, because it's the child's responsibility to determine how they feel about each parent based on their own experience. You don't need to insert anything to sway their vote one way or another. Ultimately, they'll realize what you were trying to do and be resentful. But so just leave that alone. Just really focus on when you have time with the child, when you have access to them, show interest, run all of your errands so that all you doing, it's just me and you, kid. You want to eat some cereal? Let's eat cereal together. What's your favorite show? Let's watch your favorite show. You want to go outside? Let's go outside. So that they know, like, okay, it becomes quality over quantity. If I can't see my mom, if I can't see my dad, I know when I do, they're going to let me know that they love me. Be careful about gifts. Be careful about trying to buy their love. Quality time goes a long way in terms of the investment of the relationship versus trying to buy expensive gifts to prove yourself. Practical needs are different. Socks, underwear, undershirts, winter jackets, shoes that fit, that's different. But just be careful about trying to buy them every time, you know, because then they're going to associate every time they see you, you're supposed to give them something expensive. But I would say just really making sure that you're not bad-mouthing the other parent in the same vein, and just making sure that you're spending the time. It's quality time when you do have time with the child.
You know what? That's a good point, because a lot of times in some of my cases, or the cases that I see, we have one parent who's claiming they don't even spend time with the kid. All they do is sit on their phone, or my kid comes home complaining that, you know, they had their friends over, or they were doing this and doing that. And the more that you can, one, because I'm, you know, from the legal perspective, I'm always trying to be a forward thinker as to how any type of action is going to impact your case, right? So when you're in a high conflict co-parenting type of situation, unfortunately, documentation is pretty much all you got, is pretty much everything, right? So when you are with your kid, and I'm gonna go back to answering, you know, the question that you had to the lady in the comments. I think it was a lady. I don't remember. I'm not looking at it. But anyways, it just goes back to the importance of, you know, there's things that you know, and there are things that you can prove, right? So if you have someone who is going to, and you know the other parent better than we do, right? You know the other parent better than the judge does. So you know what they're going to accuse you of. You know what they're going to say you don't do. You know what they're going to say that, you know, you do, even if it's whether it's true or not. So with those things in mind, you have to always keep at the forefront of your mind, okay, how am I going to combat that, right? And that's not a life that we want to live, but unfortunately, it comes with the territory of being in a divided or a blended family, specifically with someone or some people who are toxic, who are difficult, who just don't want to cooperate, who just always want to make something way more complex than it needs to be. So for situations like that, just to, you know, add on to what Dr. Glenna was saying, when you are talking about a situation where you know you're going to be accused of things, or you know that they're going to say you're not spending time with your kid, do those activities and things with your kids. Take lots and lots of photos. Photos have saved so many of my clients' cases, because the other parents and people, they come out the blue and they say they don't have any relationship with their child. Somebody probably can relate, where they've been accused of not having any relationship with the child. And then we present hundreds of photos from all these trips, not just trips and activities, but time at home, you know, video conversations, just screenshots from that, like all kinds of stuff. And then the judges are looking at the other parent like, okay, I see what this is here. So you have to always be in offense mode and know that you always have to be prepared to be able to prove whatever it is that you're dealing with. So to go back to the question about what do you do when the other parent who has a court order for visitation, hold on, I'm pulling the question back up really quick. If this thing, okay. For the other parent who has an order for visits, co-parent refuses to honor during COVID-19. So here's the deal with that. Because COVID-19 is such a new situation right now, right? For the most part, and we had a collective conversation about this a few weeks ago. You guys check out our replay vault so that you can see that. But we went into details about the different states and the different laws that are in place, because every area is different. But for the most part, most judges are going to expect that the court orders be followed. The judges, they know that people are going to take advantage of this whole pandemic. They're going to come up with all these excuses. The baby's sick. The baby has a cough. Oh, we have to self-quarantine for 2 weeks. Knowing good and well nothing wrong with you or your baby, right? But that's what people do. And they know that when the courts open back up, when the world opens back up, that's going to be the ongoing recurring theme that they're going to have to deal with over and over and over. He or she would not let me see the kid. He or she kept the kid outside of their, court ordered custody or visitation. So during this time in particular, the reality is, because the courts are not open right now for anything other than an emergency situation, them withholding the child from you and violating the court orders is not considered an emergency, with the exception of domestic violence situations or when your child is genuinely in danger. And by in danger, I mean real danger, not, he might take her to the store with a mask on danger. So you, unfortunately, and this is a hard conversation that I've had to have with so many people, you're going to have to focus on preparing for when you do go back to court, right? Because there's really no way to enforce your orders. Law enforcement is not really enforcing the orders everywhere, just because there's so many calls that are coming in, because this is not a one-time situation. It's a theme going on across the country where one parent is keeping the child, right? So you have to, one, understand that the court is going to look at the status quo of the parties and whether there has been high conflict from jump. Has there always been an issue where the other parent was being accused of withholding the child? If this is something that you've been telling the judge over and over and over and over, then you probably have a better chance of proving that this was just another way for them to interfere with your custody. So one thing that you're going to need to do, again, is document, send messages consistently, at least once a day. Hey, court order says this is my day. I would like to see the child. Show up to your exchange location. If they don't show up, find a way to prove that you were there. It depends on where your location is, obviously. But if you just need to figure out a way to document proof that you actually showed up and that you've been trying. And if the other parent doesn't respond, then they don't respond. But at least you have your initiation and your efforts to participate in their life and to still be there during the pandemic. And then for two, if you are the parent who is withholding the child, you're going to have to be prepared to show that that move was in the best interest of your child and was the only way to make it work, right? Because even in that case in Florida where the judge was took away the frontline medical doctors or ER doctors' custody, that appeal was granted, right? So if you guys don't know what I'm talking about, I'll post a link in the comments later. But there was essentially a case in Florida. A doctor's co-parent filed for custody. He won, and then she appealed it. And now it's reversed. But anyways, so you basically have to show, it's going to be a case-by-case basis. What's in your child's best interest? This is not the time for games. This is not the time for the back and forth. This is not the time for the tit for tat. This is a real pandemic. People are really dying. People are really sick. And your child's interest is what is most important. So you know that. You know what's best for them. If you know that your situation is not the best situation for them, right? Because of whatever your circumstances are, you're not able to shelter in place. You're not able to not, go out. Then maybe the child should stay with the other parent and you should focus on cooperating and facilitating some makeup time or a different custody schedule temporarily or whatever the case may be. But those are just, some general tips. And then generally, you also need to make sure that you're doing video chats. So even if you're not physically able to be present with your child, make efforts to do video chats. That's what the courts are pretty much ordering and requesting, proof that was happening. So if you go in there and say, well, not only did they not let me see my child, but they also wouldn't let me call. They also would not allow video chats. They also were not doing anything to facilitate our relationship in the fact that I can't see them right now. They just were basically alienating me from my child. Then you have a better way to show it. So I hope that answered your question. Dr. Glenna, did you have anything that you would like to add to that?
Nope, that covers it. I always say when it comes to that legal side, I always say Do whatever your lawyer says. Some of you guys may or may not realize this. Me as a therapist, I refer people to Merissa all the time and vice versa. And so we share clients. I have no problem saying that it's outside of my scope of practice. You need to go talk to your lawyer about that piece of the puzzle. So whatever she says in terms of how to handle that court component, do it.
Okay, so we had another question. And it was, is it okay to have the conversation on the phone? I think this question was related to having that conversation with your child, the difficult conversation on why mommy or daddy is or is not there and wants to be there. So what do you say? I'm going to tell you no. Do not have that conversation on the phone while the child is with the other parent. It's just not going to go, it's not going to go well. That's my, from a legal perspective, right? I just see backfires. I see terminating a phone call. I see not letting the other parent talk to that child anymore, saying that they're involving them in grown-up situations and, you know, making negative comments about the other parent. I just see that going all the way left. I think that that is probably a situation that should be handled in person when it's just you and your child. The other parent is not within earshot. And because what's going to follow is the parent is going to have calling you a liar and saying all the things that you don't do. And that's not.
Do what the lawyer says. There are certain things, where, like for me, if it's not causing, if it's not abuse to the child, right? I don't have any objections. Follow what your attorney says, because there is strategy to this. Unfortunately, you know, there is strategy. And so if you go about this in a way that messes up your strategy, when the other party gets to court, you know, you've weakened your case. And so if having the conversation face to face instead of having it over the phone does not cause immediate or any type of abuse to the child, do that.
Okay. So, in other words, no. No phone conversation. All right, let me see what other comments or questions we have. Here's another question. Let's see if I can pop it up there. Okay, my 10-year-old really doesn't want to spend an entire month in the summer. My ex won't budge. I thought of foregoing his back child support so she wouldn't have to go. She was already worried about it now. Well, we're in the middle of a pandemic right now. I don't know if this is an out-of-state type of situation or what, but if it is, then you might be in luck because a lot of people aren't traveling, depending on where you are and what the rules are. But then you have situations where some judges are saying it's okay, put them on a plane anyway. So it's really a case-by-case situation. So for that type of situation, the best thing that I can tell you is you definitely need to make sure that you go ahead and initiate some kind of legal proceeding to modify your orders, and then find a way to allow your child's voice to be heard. So for example, in California, we have a process that allows our children to be interviewed in a safe space, not in a courtroom with a bunch of people, but in a safe space privately with a therapist. It's usually a psychologist or a psychologist that the court assigns. They can talk to the child, find out exactly what their feelings are, why they feel that way, but just be forewarned that they're going to ask them a lot of questions about both households. So if it comes out, oh, well, the reason I don't want to go with dad or mom is because the other parent was telling me all the fun things that we're going to do, and I'm going to miss out if I go with the other parent, or they don't like me being away, then we might have a problem. So that could easily backfire. But if this is a legitimate concern that your child has and they're 10, I'm not sure how long those orders have been in place, but 10 years old technically is going to depend on which court you go to. The court tends to, you know, sometimes they will hear from the child. Again, this is usually done indirectly through some formal process. So whatever, you need to find out, one, what that process would look like. If you can type your state in the comment section, then I can send you a link to how you can find that out in your area if you're not already familiar with the courts. And then from there, find out what the process is, and then go ahead and initiate that process so that you can request to modify those orders. Because what your child is telling you is hearsay, right? You can't go in court and say, my daughter doesn't want to go. I mean, you could say that because that's what we do on a regular basis. But the judge is going to say, well, I mean, yeah, I know you're saying she doesn't want to go, but what does that mean? So you have to, again, I always tell people, do not resort to self-help unless there is a true emergency, which means I know your daughter doesn't want to go, but unless there's a true fear of danger, abuse, something, drastic along those lines, I'd be very, very with violating court orders because of something that a 10-year-old said, because especially without filing something to request modification of it, because that could backfire, and you don't want to have to deal with contempt proceedings and all of that stuff. So, okay. Next question we have. Here we go. This is one for you, Dr. Glenna. How do I deal with a manipulative co-parent who makes the child feel responsible for her happiness, uses the child as an emotional comfort blanket? Oh, that's like the textbook version of all the opposing parties in my cases. Even when I represent kids, I have the kids come in and they're like, well, I can't go visit dad because my mom will be so depressed, or I can't go visit mom because, my dad, he needs me to be there to help with his infant, or whatever the case is, right? So how do you deal with that as far as communicating with the child? Like, how do you have that conversation with the child?
So I was going to comment, and this actually kind of ties into what I was going to say. Every child has to learn how to deal with their own parent, right? Like, we have to deal with every single person on the planet has to learn how to deal with their own parent, good, bad, or otherwise. You'd be like, oh, you need some help, mama? No, I'm okay. Go in there and help her before she start cussing everybody out. Like, everybody has to learn what to do and what to say, for their own parent. And so for the 10-year-old that doesn't want to go out of state for 30 days, it's a very similar answer to this one that is combating a parent that is trying to use them as an emotional blanket, or hold them responsible for their own emotions. So teaching a child how to set healthy boundaries. This is similar to what I was saying earlier also, and that helping a child understand that you can be a loved one and I can still set a boundary. It doesn't mean that I'm being rude. I don't know what it is about traditional Black culture where we think that a child setting a boundary or objecting is disrespectful. It's not the same as disrespect, but teaching a child that they have a voice and teaching them how to assertively address themselves within the context of a parent-child's respectful relationship. It empowers them, helping them to understand what is their level of responsibility and what is not their level of responsibility, helping them to understand like a sense of agency, like, okay, I have mastery over myself, which means you need to have mastery over yourself, which means like, oh, mommy is so sad. Well, mommy, I hope that you feel better, and not feeling like you're mommy's therapist, not feeling like you are, I can't move until mommy feels better. Yes, you can. Mommy is responsible for her own feelings. Well, daddy needs help with A, B, and C. Daddy is a grown man. Daddy has the resources to hire a gardener, a babysitter, get his nails done, or whatever, go to the barbershop. Daddy needs to have the resources to take care of himself independently and not be relying on the child to take care of himself. And so as the custodial parent that is dealing with a co-parent that is inflicting these things on the child, you focus on teaching that child to speak assertively. You focus on helping that child to understand boundaries, where their life ends and the next person's life starts. There's a line. I am responsible for myself and my own emotions, gathering myself, centering myself. I am not responsible for yours. You made me mad. My actions were offensive. But if you choose to harbor that anger, that's your choice. And teaching your children to be able to say this in an age-appropriate and respectful way. And again, each child has to learn how to navigate their own parent. This don't have anything to do with the parent being toxic. That's just, everybody, you can say, like, I know my mama. Don't worry about it. I got it. I know my mama. Every child has to get to that level. And so if this means having conversations with a child and make sure that you're instilling independence, letting them, this is going to sound weird, letting them debate with you so that they can practice their verbal skills. so that they can practice on you, and you model for them how to go about speaking up for themselves so that they're not afraid to properly and respectfully address authority, so that they practice that at home. It's no different than playing Monopoly, right? I'm practicing how to go about having the opportunity to save money, buy property, so that when it happens in the real world, I'm better equipped for it. So if it's like, you know, you should wear the orange shirt. I don't want to wear the orange shirt. Well, why not? Present your case. You know, explain to me, what is it about the blue shirt that you want to wear that one instead of the orange shirt that I'm suggesting? Give them the forum so that they can practice these verbal skills, so it's second nature. So that way, when they feel anyone pushing their boundaries, even their other parent, they have the skill set, they have the verbiage to go back and say, no, Dad, I love you and I want you to feel good, but I can't make you feel good. That's on you. They got therapists for that. And for some parents, and in all fairness, what I'm talking about is assertive communication. And a lot of times us parents, we don't feel like we have the right language. And so you can always send them to a therapist, have a conversation with the therapist and say, hey, this is what's going on. You know, I'm concerned that, you know, she's going to be emotionally manipulated by the other parent. I'm concerned that the other parent, you know, is showing signs of narcissism or emotional abuse, and they're using the child for what we call supply. Supply is basically when a narcissist needs your adoration and your attention in order for them to feel full. And narcs, oh my God, will they groom their children to make sure that they always have supply through their children. So you can have this conversation with the therapist, and so the therapist can also help them to give them tips and tools on how to address it, and also to give them a forum for the child to download some of the experiences that they've had that are confusing.
Right. And speaking of therapists, because a lot of times, and this is something that another difficult conversation that I often have to have, I am the attorney that pretty much always recommends a therapist for children who are dealing with parents who, not even just toxic parents, but just parents who don't like each other, because they always feel torn in the middle, whether it's a child I'm representing, whether it is a child that's being interviewed and I'm representing one of the parents. It always comes back to the child feeling like they're being pulled, right? From left, mommy's side, daddy's side. I can't let daddy know that I'm happy at mom's house. I can't let mom know that I'm excited to go to dad's house. So I'm going to act like I don't like dad. I'm going to act like I don't like mom, or like I'm neutral, because they feel like they don't have a choice. So if you are in a high conflict situation, your kids need therapy. And that's just the bottom line, because especially if they're struggling in any area, even if you think they're okay, because a lot of times they harbor so much inside, and then we get them into therapy, and that's where the madness comes out, right? And that's also where a lot of cases are won, because guess who might have to be the person to come and testify at some point? The therapist, right? So that hearsay element that we're talking about, you coming in court saying my child is struggling with going to the other parent's house, is witness domestic violence, is a whole lot different than your child having a therapist that they can communicate this to, right? And one, the therapist is a mandated reporter. So if there is anything crazy going on at the other house, the therapist will make sure that's reported. And then two, if you need, or if a situation comes up where, you know, you need that third party to corroborate your side of the story, that's where it's going to come in. So, and then on top of that, of course, the primary component is your child is being allowed this safe space to communicate and deal with whatever issues that they're dealing with, essentially on their own without a therapist. Because yeah, they can talk to you, but it's completely different, because they're not going to be 100% honest about every little thing with you, because they don't want to hurt your feelings. They don't want to make you mad. They don't want to make you sad, and everything else. So therapy, if y'all ain't got your kids in therapy, I advise that's your homework. So let's talk about narcissism, because narcissism. Is it narcissism? Did I just jack the word up? Whatever the word is. Narcissistic parents, right? Because everybody comes to me and says, oh, my co-parent is a narcissist, right?
Yeah. And
I'm always asking Glenna, I need to know, what does the narcissist look like? We talk about this all the time because people are saying it all the time, right? And I'm not a mental health therapist. That's not my ministry. So whenever I need to know how to deal with a situation, how to deal with a case, I have to call Dr. Glenna, because that's her expertise, right? So the way that you deal, from what I've learned from her, The way you deal with the narcissist is different than the way you deal with a typical, for lack of a better word, person, right? So talk about narcissism. What does that look like? I know it's not, you can't define it, but like a textbook version or whatever y'all call it in your industry. the textbook version of narcissism.
Yes.
And how you can deal with it in a way that allows you to be at peace, even though they don't want you to be.
Okay. So narcissism or a narcissist is a type of personality disorder. Personality disorders are a little different. There's different types. There's different types of disorders. There's personality disorders, mood disorders, psychotic disorders, eating disorders, right? So like bulimia or anorexia. Personality disorders differ because they are ingrained into the person's personality, so much so that the person does not know that they have a disorder. For example, if I have somebody that is anorexic, they may be in denial about the severity of what's happening with them, but they recognize that their eating habits are abnormal. Okay. If I have somebody that is suffering from depression, the severity of the depression can vary, whether it's mild, moderate to severe, but they recognize that they have a higher level of sadness or hopelessness than the next person. The very nature of a narcissist, they believe that they are right and that they can do no wrong. And that's why I say I treat victims of emotional abuse, not narcissists, because they're not interested in change. They're not interested in progress. And so a narcissist is a person that has an inflated sense of self. Okay. So they believe that they are higher, more important, more smarter than the next person. The key thing to remember about them is that they operate off of supply. So I always use the example of the Tin Man from The Wizard of Oz. Okay. So if you look at the Tin Man from the outside, he's big, he's strong. In The Wizard of Oz, he actually has an axe. You know what I mean? In The Wiz, he got a beard. You know what I mean? Like, So, but the Tin Man essentially on the outside, it looks big and tough and impenetrable to a certain degree, right? It looks like if you hit him, you're not going to bust through him hard. But he's hollow on the inside. Hollow on the inside. Matter of fact, what the Tin Man wants is a heart, right? Hollow on the inside. And the only way that the Tin Man can operate is through oil. Okay. When he runs out of oil, he locks up, he can't move, he rusts. And so oil is the equivalent of supply. Supply is your positive attention or your negative attention. They will take anything that they can get, right? So now you got this person that you think is a narc on the phone. And first they're like, oh my God, I miss you so much. And I really wish we could get back together. You're like, no, not happening. No, what time you picking the baby up? No. And then it flips to, you wasn't even no good person. No way. Why you thought, I don't nobody want to be with you. You ain't gonna never be with nobody. They will take your positive attention. Okay. So first it was, we should get back together and blah, blah, blah. They would love to hear you say, oh my God, I miss you so much. They'll take that. That is supply. And if you won't give them that, they'll flip it and they'll take your argument. They will take your argument, your frustration, your tears, your sadness, your confusion. They'll take it all. Okay. So the biggest thing to remember is supply. You don't want to be supply. How do we not be supply? You go no contact. How you get to no contact, how you parent with no contact. I don't know if we have enough time. I got a couple of terms that I could say, but I think the biggest thing to remember is narcissists appear big and bad on the outside. They are actually hollow on the inside. And the only way that they can operate is through your positive attention or your negative attention. So if you can't go no contact, you go gray rock. Gray rock is very boring. Okay. Think of just a gray rock. It ain't no color to it. It ain't no shape. It ain't nothing jazzy about it. It's just there, just taking up space. You can't kick it because it'll hurt your foot. You just want to become as small and boring as possible. How do you do that? You stick to the script. They're called, hey, we should really get back together. Okay. So you're going to pick the baby up at 3, right? All right. Take care. Boring. Boring. I got nothing for you. Eliminate those lengthy conversations. If it ain't about business, get off the phone. When it starts to turn into, I was just thinking, I called your mom the other day. Oh, okay. Well, all right. Have a good day. I got to go. Dead it. Dead it. Do not get wrapped up. Do not have conversations about anything other than business. And if you don't have the intestinal fortitude to dead those conversations, they should all be electronic. They should all be text. They should all be through Talking Parent. They should all be via email so that you can just print it out and put it in your file for later on, so that you're not going back and forth between who said what. But you have to become gray rock. You have to become so boring that they can't get anything from you. And I hate to say it, but they move on and get supply from somebody else.
The key. That is the key, right? You don't want to be the supply. No. The other person can figure out how they can no longer be supplied too, right? But I mean, that's what we're talking about. Right.
But yeah, but I mean, that's the key. You don't want to be supplied.
Got to do it.
You don't. And so when you're thinking, every single interaction is potential supply. Every single time. Some people are like, oh, it's cool, we get along. Listen, it ain't never sweet. It ain't never cool. They ain't never your friend. Y'all ain't never on the up and up. Never. It's a tactic for a narcissist. Like, trust me. Trust me. I've seen it. I've seen people go in and out the loop. It ain't never sweet. Just keep it short, polite, and be out. That's the best I can say. Oh, and the other one, supply. No contact when you can, but if you're co-parenting, it's hard to go no contact, so you go gray rock. The other thing is watch the flying monkeys, okay? So also from the Wizard of Oz, the Wicked Witch of the West would sit in her castle and send the flying monkeys out, right? They would do the dirty work. They would gather information. They would come back. They would tell the witch what was going on. They would send messages from the witch, and sometimes they didn't even say anything. Sometimes they just flew around, and their presence in and of itself was intimidating, okay? So what does that look like for us? Flying monkeys look like people watching your social media reporting back to the other person. Flying monkeys looks like that mutual friend that you thought was, oh, she's cool, she's friend with both of us. No, baby, she's a flying monkey. She's sending you messages. She's saying, well, you know, she said that she still wants to be with you. Watching your reaction to see, and then they go back and they report. And it goes either way. Either they're bringing you information from your ex, or they're bringing information about you to your ex. So be careful about flying monkeys and giving up too much information and allowing everybody to have access to you and your life, either real life or via social media. Again, we could do a whole session just on narcs.
Right. So yeah, and that's one thing that you know, a lot of my clients struggle with, right? Because I teach people peaceful co-parenting, cooperative co-parenting, and you know, for those of you who don't know, I have a book series called The Business of Co-Parenting. Shameless plug. But anyway, in my book series, I have a book for moms, a book for dads, a book for step parents, and I'm talking about treating your co-parenting relationship like a business relationship, right? So making sure that you're communicating and interacting in a way that is similar to a business transaction. And one thing that is very apparent is that when you are dealing with a narcissist, that method is not going to work, right? I mean, it works a little bit as it relates to the communicating and writing, sticking to the script, like Dr. Glenna said, making sure that you're not having these other conversations. But a lot of times, because a lot of us desire to have a peaceful, cooperative, co-parenting relationship, we get stuck on the idea of that. And as soon as a narcissist says, oh, you know what, let's do this together now, we fall for the setup, right? Fall for it. And then you end up in a situation where you're back at the beginning of that cycle that you were trying to get out of, right? So you just got to be really, really careful. And again, I'm the therapy recommending attorney because I see how not only it impacts the cases that I work on, but also impacts my clients' lives. Like if you have someone who is familiar with narcissism and how it works, that person can guide you on how to keep your own sanity, right, when dealing with them, especially when it's a situation that you have to deal with them on a regular basis. So if you don't have a therapist, get one. It will change the game for you. Dealing with toxic people, period, is already a task in and of itself. So we got a bunch of questions or comments. So let me just go through some of those because I know we're running out of time here. Let's see here. Uh-oh. Here's one about a restraining order. Let's see what that question is. I had a violent incident. My son's father was arrested, but then they gave us a restraining order. They didn't include our son. And when we had the hearing, it was continued for 90 days. Can I do anything to shorten the length of time to return to court? Right now, probably not, because right now, the courts are only open for an emergency situation. So if the other parent was not included, if their restraining order did not include a provision protecting the child, then something's going on to where they did not feel that that would be warranted. And so to answer your question, probably not. I don't know, because I don't know what court you're by and how they're operating. But generally, I'm going to say probably not, because there's no emergency, unless there is. Dr. Glenna. Oh, hold on. Let me unmute you.
Yeah.
Okay.
I was just going to say, I don't know. I mean, it's just a quick question. So I don't know if there was a CPS was called Child Protective Services, or whatever they call it in the area that you live in. But I mean, it's another way. Like, people, whenever I have new intakes, I always warn people that if it sounds like child abuse, I have to make a report. And one of the specific examples that I give is if two people got into a fight in front of the child, it's considered abuse. So even if something happened and the child was present, it's considered abuse. And so I don't know, the ins and outs or what happened if the child was there. But that may be another route. Like, if you're concerned about sending the child because you're concerned about potential child abuse, then you can it always sounds weird when I say this, but you can call and report yourself. People are scared to do that because people they've heard so many horror stories about dealing with Child Protective Services. But the way that it's intended to be used is if there is a threat or actual child abuse going on, they are there to intervene. And so, it's up to your discretion as to whether or not you feel like it's something that you need to call for. But if you're concerned about sending your child over there because of potential abuse, then that is an agency that you can always access.
Yes. And speaking of, just as a sidebar, since we're talking about Child Protective Services, unfortunately, in a lot of cases too, if there is a genuine belief, right? Like, you genuinely believe that there's some kind of abuse situation going on, what I've been having to deal with on a regular basis for my cases that involve that type of element is if you did not call and attempt to stop that interaction between the child and the other parent from happening, and you genuinely believe that there was going to be abuse, or you knew that there was some kind of domestic violence happening, then they'll flip it on you, and they could potentially, file a claim or an allegation you for child neglect or child endangerment or things of that nature. So that's a whole nother conversation for a whole nother day. But if that's the situation, I would advise, one, you need to find a lawyer and get some legal advice tailored to your situation. Did I give my disclaimer? This is not legal advice. It's only legal information. I don't ever do that, but I need to do that. So that's y'all's disclaimer. But yeah, generally, you just need to make sure that you always do what's in the best interest of your child, right? So if you genuinely believe there's a threat, or that your child is in danger, you got to do what you got to do to protect your child. And nobody knows what that is but you. But be careful about false claims, or if you're not sure, or if you really don't suspect that your child will be in danger, then I wouldn't, don't do that. So let's move on to the next question. I believe this one is for you. And it says, Doctor, if the child doesn't want to go with the non-custodial parent, what would you recommend the custodial parent do to help heal the relationship their child has with the other parent?
A couple different things. So one, Merissa v. Grayson actually gave me the suggestion a while ago for a different issue, but offered to help facilitate family therapy. And that does not mean like you and the other parent and the child. It could, but suggest that the other parent go to family therapy as a way to kind of facilitate, like, hey, like, you and your child, there's a break in your relationship. So maybe if you guys did this together, this is me making the suggestion. I'll help you find the family therapist if that helps. But, your child is a little leery about going over there, or, figure out an assertive way to say it, because how you broach this is going to have a huge impact on how it's going to be received. But essentially, consider family therapy. Consider, like, with your child, like, hey, how do you feel about going to, family therapy with your mommy, so that you can have somebody present to kind of talk about the issues that you have. if you have the ability to be a neutral ear for your child, then give them a place to talk about it. If you can do it and be objective. If you have too many personal ill feelings towards the other parent, and your blood is going to be boiling, or they're going to say something and you're going to start twitching, and you don't essentially have the ability to be impartial, you don't have the ability to be neutral, then you may not be the best person to have that conversation. But essentially try again to give your child a forum to be able to talk about their feelings. Validation goes a long way. Everybody operates that way. When you hear somebody say like, wow, like, okay, I understand, I see how that would bother you. Validation goes a long way, because it makes a person feel heard. It makes a person feel seen. And oftentimes that's enough for them just to get in motion. Like, okay, as long as somebody understands where I'm coming from, and you guys aren't just ignoring me or just shoveling me from one person's house to the next with no regard for my feelings, then I can go, or I can feel better about it, or if there's something that helps your child to feel empowered, then, I've seen the co-parent that will have no problem letting the child call their other parent during their visit. Like, oh, you miss your mommy? Call your mommy. Call her right now. You can sit on the phone with her as long as you want, So I've seen it happen. I know it's possible. But anything that you can do to give your child a forum to talk about their feelings, any phrases that you can give them to help them to feel seen and heard and empowered, and anything that you can do to help the child facilitate a better relationship with the other parent, please do that.
Right. And that goes back to, my point about just communication, right? And being able to prove things in court. So if you're in that situation and your child doesn't want to go with the other parent, you already know what the other parent is going to say. Mom or dad is manipulating the child. She really wants to come with me, but she doesn't feel comfortable. So by you initiating and making an effort to bridge the gap of that relationship, if there is a gap, right? And you saying, hey, I know you want to see your child. I want to facilitate this relationship. I want to make sure you can see them in a safe space so that you guys can repair whatever is broken. How do you feel about therapy? Then when you're back in court, you can say, well, it's not that I said they couldn't see the other child. I've been trying to facilitate, some reunification therapy, some family therapy, so that they can get back on track. But the child is uncomfortable right now, and the other parent refuses. No parent who has their child's best interest at the forefront is going to deny a request to go to therapy, because therapy is not going to hurt, right? So if a parent is saying, no, I'm not going to therapy with the child, no, I'm not going to allow my child to be, to see a therapist, then that's a red flag for me in particular as the attorney. And that's something that I'm going to start digging into, because I need to know why you don't want this child to see a therapist, because it's not necessarily just going to be an ego thing. That might be a safety thing. So that's just something to, keep in mind. Okay, let me move on to the next question here. Did it work? Okay. The co-parent wants to move back home across the country after the pandemic. Oh, that's a good question. Hold on. I'm trying to put it on the screen, but it's not. Oh, there we go. Co-parent wants to move back home across the country after COVID-19. We co-parent without the courts. She is talking to our child about it, telling me she wants to go. Is it okay to ask a 10-year-old their opinion on such a big decision? So from the legal perspective, I will say, I'm not going to say it's not okay, but what I will say is, if somebody's talking about moving your child out of the state and you're co-parenting without the courts right now, that probably means you have no court orders in place, and you might be in a predicament. So this is some unsolicited information. You might want to look into how to get a case open quickly, so that the temporary restraining orders that are automatically put in place when you file a custody or visitation or a divorce action typically prevent either parent from taking the child out of the state without the other parent's consent, right? You don't want someone to, because there's no court orders, kidnap your kid. I'm using the word kidnap for the lack of a better description, but take your child out of the state, move, across the country, and there's no orders to enforce. So, that's just a sidebar. What do you say about the conversation though, Dr. Glenna? Is it okay to have that conversation?
I believe all conversations can be had at an age appropriate need to know basis, right? And so I don't believe with a 10-year-old, you need to sit down and be like, listen, I got this opportunity across the country. They're going to pay me $50,000. They're going to give me a $10,000. But, you know, there's all of the details about why or how, you know, I'm just not happy here. The traffic is crazy. All of the gory details about the whys and the hows, that's not appropriate in terms of sharing all of that. But the other thing that you don't want to do is just come back one day and be like, hi, mommy's moving to New York tomorrow. You know, like you don't want to do that either. And so I really feel like, number one, listen to your lawyer. So get some things in place, you know, to kind of protect yourself. And be careful about jumping the gun on presenting information to a child when nothing is really in motion. Because you could be putting undue anxiety into a child at just the thought of what could happen. They don't understand all the variables. They don't understand what it takes to move across the country. They don't know what it takes to move from, you know, here to the next city over. And so if none of this is even set in stone, if none of this is even in motion, then it's probably not appropriate to share with anybody for that matter. You know, like just get your ducks in a row. And then once you have something concrete, then start to share it little by little at an age appropriate manner. But just, you know, the thought of it, like, I don't know. I think if there's an age appropriate way, a very sensitive way that you could just kind of like, hey, what do you think about this? You know, just to hear their opinion and hear how they feel about it. But I would, again, just be sensitive about putting something in their brain that now they are losing sleep over that might not ever even happen.
Thank you very much. Awesome. Someone asked a question about, and I know I've seen a couple of comments about this, and I know someone from our team answered, but if you're looking for a therapist right now, right, we're in the middle of a pandemic, most offices aren't open. Are there any specific resources where you can get therapy? You know, I know you're offering telehealth services, but if you're looking for therapy for, you know, yourself or your kid, what types of sites or what types of resources can people go to try to start therapy? This is for people who have not jumped into that lane yet.
So most places are open. All the private practice therapists that I know, we've all gone online temporarily. And so you can still access therapists. Don't think that we're shut down. We are not essential in the way that first responders, ER doctors are essential. But we are essential in that it would be extremely unethical if we shut down right now. And we are going to be even more essential when all of this is over and everyone is recovering from all the trauma. But that's a whole nother conversation. So just something to keep in mind. We are open. We are still accepting new clients. There's two different things. There's a website, therapyforblackgirls.com. I always recommend it to people because it is a nationwide listing of African-American therapists. It's therapy for Black girls, but of course, men. If you need a Black therapist, reach out, right? It's a great resource. You just go to the website, you put in your zip code, and it'll pull up therapists in your area. You can look at their profile. You can go to their individual websites to kind of do some research on them. And also, there's a blog that I've written. I don't know if we're going to email out, but basically, it's on my website under the blog section. It's called Meet Me on the Couch. It's a step-by-step instruction process of how to go about finding a therapist, what you should be looking for, how to use your insurance, questions you should be asking, how to keep track of things, a couple of resources, what to do when you think you found a therapist, what you should expect the first couple of sessions, when to know when it's time to terminate. It's a whole blog post that outlines how to go about this process for people that are really starting from scratch, who have never been in therapy before and just don't really know what to expect.
So we have another question here. What are reasonable expectations to set with your child regarding sharing information between homes? Oh, that's a good question, especially when the other parent has instructed the child not to tell their business or any info with the other parent. I'll let you take that one.
Okay, so this one is tough. If there is potential for abuse, then it's a different type of answer, right? Like if there's some abuse going on in the other household and the other parent is trying to cover for it and you're concerned about abuse, then that's different. Depending on the age of the child, you can really help your kids to understand that we do surprises, but we don't do secrets, right? So if we're planning a surprise party, we want to do something nice for somebody, we can do surprises. We don't do secrets. So we don't do, don't tell anybody. We don't do that. But so you teach surprises, no secrets. And unless there is concern about abuse, about what's going on, like if your child is being sexually abused or physically abused in the other house, I'm sorry. Don't worry about what's going on in the other house. And it's hard because that's your baby and you want to know, like, you know, well, what's happening? You know, what's this? If you like to decorate your child's room and you want to paint butterflies on the ceiling, you don't get to know whether or not they got butterflies at the other person's house, right? Now, if your child is sleeping on the kitchen floor with a blanket, that's a different story. You know, that's something that you need to know and that's something that you need to be aware of. But if your child is being, you know, loved and fed and taken care of at the other house, you really don't need to know what's going on in the other house. Like I said, unless there's something that's abusive, you know what I mean? Because anything outside of that, it's a matter of preference. It's a matter, and even food can be abusive. You know, if they only feed your child oodles of noodles 24 hours a day and will not put a vegetable in your baby's mouth when they're over there, that's a valid concern. But outside of that, it's a matter of preference. And unfortunately, you don't have the authority to run the other person's household. Like you just don't, you know. Part of co-parenting is like, to the best of our ability, can we create a schedule so that it's streamlined, you know, so that the child is doing homework and getting sleep. But unless it's abusive, you don't have a say in what happens in someone else's house.
Awesome stuff. I have another question here. I like that you guys are popping the questions in today. Normally, I'm like, anybody got questions? So if you have any questions, please drop them in the comments before we go. Because if you call us after the fact, guess what's going to be involved? A little bit of money, consultation fees, all that good stuff. So while we're here, drop your questions. And if you know anyone who views this information, please share this video. Now, next question is, do you find that narcissistic behaviors are more common in women versus men?
I don't know the stats. I feel like the stats are a little bit higher in men. But I've seen, you heard of like mother wound, narcissistic mothers. Like I can't even say. I've treated so many people that are victims of emotional abuse, and it's been narcissistic fathers, narcissistic mothers, siblings, spouses, ex-girlfriends, ex-boy. I don't know what the official stats are, but I can't say that I've seen it in more than one or the other. I've seen dating relationships with narcissistic women. Really, what it boils down to is narcissists and empaths, people that are very emotional, very kind, very forgiving. They're like magnets. The opposites attract. And so I have not seen it specific to gender, and I don't know the official statistics on that.
Gotcha. Okay, let's see. What happens if the other parent calls child services on you and lies just because they do not want to have you to have the child? Oh, that's a story of my cases every day. So in a lot of cases, there will be false abuse claims, right? So the good news is most states have some kind of provision that, I'm not going to say prohibits, but has some kind of remedy if a parent makes false allegations about abuse, being perpetrated by the other parent, and it turns out that it wasn't true. So you're going to need to find out what those laws are in your state. Every state is different. So that's step one. But step two is that, again, it all boils down to documentation, right? So if your child have a great relationship, that means you need to snap more photos. You're going to need to, just pay attention and have people around you who can witness your loving relationship with your child. Because ultimately, there has to be some form of a hearing of some sort, whether that be through the Child Protective Services procedure that they're putting you through, which sometimes in some states, that's a whole nother court than family court, or whether it be in your child custody case. So you're going to have to, again, we talked about documentation earlier in the video. So, just make sure you're paying attention, you're documenting, you have people around you who can corroborate the fact that you are a great parent and there is no abuse, And I also have a video specifically on this topic on my YouTube channel. So if you are, you know, my YouTube channel is Merissa B. Grayson. I'll put the link in the comments, and you can look for that video, because I do go through step by step just how to deal with that type of situation, because unfortunately, it's not an uncommon one. So, okay, let me go back through. Let's see. Rob says, not a question, just a comment. This has been an amazing session. Ah, thank you. I am happy that you guys are finding this helpful. Again, we thank you for tuning in. If you have any more questions, please drop them in the comment section. If you know someone who could use this information, please share this content out. And let's see. I think we have a couple more. Nope, I think that's it. Let me check the other streams comments, because I've been trying to go back and forth between the two. Anyone else have any questions? We are wrapping up. Again, if you're just now tuning in, you are watching the collective conversation on co-parenting with a toxic ex. And let's see. Okay, I don't see any more questions. So again, I just want to tell you all, thank you for tuning in. We appreciate you guys tuning in. We hope that you have found this information helpful. Again, we have done, I think we're on, this is like our 8th or 9th or 10th, I don't even know, collective conversation. We are the collective legal and crisis management firm. We are a team of not only attorneys, because we do have amazing attorneys on our team, but the difference between our firm and any other firm is that we have in-house professionals like Dr. Glenna, who will help us navigate your cases so that you can not only be good in the courtroom, but that you'll be good on the outside after your case is over, long after, you know, we're done representing you on that aspect. So we tackle every element of your case, whether it's child custody, business, you know, entertainment, criminal law. We make sure that you are covered on all ends. So we have therapists on our team. We have a parenting instructor. We have a domestic violence recovery expert on our team. We have a communication strategist, a crisis management director. We have a money person, a financial executive who helps our clients make sure that their money is going in the right places and helps us find money in child custody and child support cases. We have, it's a lot of us. It's 15 of us total now. And if you are not familiar with us, we are at The Collective Legal on all social media platforms. Again, our site is www.thecollectivelcm, that's for legal crisis management.com. You can find me. I'm at Merissa V. Grayson on all social media platforms. My name is on the screen. And then you can also find Dr. Glenna on all social media platforms at Dr. Glenna LCSW. Now, for those who are looking to do therapy services, I did have a question in the comments on one of the video streams that asked if you do therapy for other states. Are you just in California? Do you do coaching? What services do you offer, and how can everyone get in contact with you outside of social media?
Okay, so my social media platforms are Dr. Glenna LCSW. The LCSW is licensed clinical social worker, means I am licensed in the state of California. So I can treat anyone within the state of California, from Stanislaus to San Diego and everything in between. I cannot offer individual clinical services to anyone outside of the state of California. So that's why I wrote that blog post, to kind of help people find someone in your area. I do offer the happy hour every Wednesday. It's a completely free 60-minute webinar. And I'm big on teaching. Like I said, I don't like just having hypothetical conversations and then just leaving you. So you can go to any of my social media platforms and you can register for the happy hour. I know for sure the link is on my Instagram. Again, the live session is completely free. You can get the replay for free up to 5 days afterward. And then after that, they go into a vault. I'm also getting ready to open up group therapy sessions. But again, I'm licensed here in the state of California, but I do have a resource to help you find someone in your area.
All right. Any final words for the people before we exit? Make therapy a lifestyle and get you some therapy. I done said it a million times, I'm not a therapist, but again, this just having Dr. Glenna on the team, having, you know, someone who can help clients, help us navigate cases, I'm telling you, it's a game changer. So if you don't already have a therapist in your midst, make sure, if you are unable to use Dr. Glenna, make sure that you have someone on your team. So again, we thank you all for tuning in. We have a collective conversation on Thursday, I believe, of this week. It is on navigating contractual obligations during the pandemic. That's going to be with one of our attorneys, Shannon N. Davis, and she's going to be talking about all of these contracts we have in place that you can't perform right now because you're not allowed to go nowhere in a lot of places, right? How to navigate that, how to deal with it, or if you have contracts that are supposed to be fulfilled on the other end and they aren't complying, what can you do? So we are going to be talking about that. On Friday, we're talking about nonprofits with our business formation expert, Janae Coffey, who is also our operations manager. So if you are in the nonprofit space, if you've been dreaming of starting a nonprofit, this is the conversation for you. Again, thank you all for tuning in, and we will see you next time.